Education is constantly evolving. Staying informed about emerging trends is crucial for school administrators, teachers, students, parents, and communities. Welcome to Learning Forever, hosted by Dr. Sue Lang, President of NewsBank's K-12 division. Dr. Lang engages with national leaders to discuss the pressing issues facing education today. Learning Forever is brought to you by NewsBank, a global news and information provider to schools, libraries, and research institutions worldwide. In this episode, Dr. Lang discusses breaking down the civics silo, integrating civics into the broader curriculum.
Hello, my name is Dr. Susan Lang, and I'm welcoming you to the Learning Forever series put on by NewsBank Learning, which is a company in Naples, Florida. We are pleased today to invite Zach Cote to our series today to talk about social studies. And as you saw in the title, it's breaking down the silos of social studies, but more important, it's about shifting the mindset of how we think about social studies, civics, US history, and really thinking about the purpose of it and the cross-curricular needs that we have today. When you think about students that are learning history, do we want them to just know the facts, or we want them to really analyze what's happened in the past and apply it now to today? And one of the key studies that we did, and I know that Zach is familiar with, is from the Fordham Foundation that was done in 2021. And it confirmed across our country, K-12 students are not getting a knowledge base of civics or US history. And the percentages are very, very low. So we want to change that. And that's what today's discussion is about, is how can we change that mindset? And what is Thinking Nation doing about that? I met Zach at a conference, a national conference last year, at AASA, the American Association of School Administrators, and went to a session and became very engaged, not only because I'm interested in history, but because of what he had to say about history and civics. So with that, I'd like to share and open it up to Zach. Welcome, Zach.
Thank you, Sue, for having me. It's always an interesting, space to enter, at the AASA conference, where so many people are kind of focused on things that go beyond the social studies classroom, and maybe don't leave enough space for these conversations around social studies. And yet we're looking at our democracy and looking at the system of government that we're under. And I think across the political continuum, we're frustrated. And, the social studies classroom is perhaps better equipped than any other hour of the day, at least in secondary education, to engage future voters around how we can act within that democracy and hopefully strengthen it. And yet we're not having the conversations. And so, first and foremost, thank you for having me and, providing space for this conversation.
Well, you're welcome. So we look forward to hearing more about your background and also about Thinking Nation. So why don't we start with that?
Sure. Yeah. So currently I serve as the executive director of Thinking Nation, and we're a national nonprofit based out of Los Angeles that really, our mission is twofold. We, at the highest level, we want to cultivate thinking citizens. And second to that, or kind of the causal agent of that, is to shift the paradigm of how we see social studies education as a collective. So from the student to the classroom teacher to the district administrator to our legislators, we want to shift this paradigm of how we see social studies education. And the paradigm shift is pretty simple. Most ways that we understand history and social studies education is through the content of those classes. Whereas we're trying to make the argument that we really need to see the collective of these classes as a discipline. And a discipline is something that we and our students engage with, whereas a content is something that we remember. And we think that the ability to engage with the discipline is really what's going to empower our students as thinking citizens in a much more meaningful and long-lasting way, this lifelong learning opportunity than content retention would be. And so I was a classroom teacher, a middle school teacher in South Los Angeles prior to, kind of seeing Thinking Nation grow over the last few years. And at the heart of my classroom, and I always told my students I wanted to run this classroom as a college classroom. And so that really meant engagement around ideas. It meant the analysis of sources, the critique of those sources. So these historical thinking skills really provide meaning to the stories and the content that we learn. So like contextualization, I think the two that are kind of most impactful to me personally are historical significance. So why is something significant? Why does it matter? And I love historical significance because a lot of times we talk about historical relevance. Why does this matter today? Whereas significance would be, why does this matter? That's just a question mark. And there's such a difference because historical relevance, I think, kind of amplifies some of our innate narcissistic tendencies to understand things in our own image. Whereas historical significance asks us to think, well, why might this be significant to a different group of people from a different perspective in a different time and place? And that pushes us out of our own perspective to really seek out and understand the perspectives of those that we study. And so I love that term significance for that reason. And then that leads really directly into another skill that we really focus on in our resources, and which is historical empathy. And so, something that I learned as an undergrad is that historians should avoid presentism. And presentism is essentially saying that I'm going to only look at the past through the lens of the present. So I'm going to make all sort of judgments about the past based off my present understanding, all sort of conclusions based on my present understanding. And really, we need to understand the past on its own terms. And that doesn't mean our present doesn't shape that understanding, but it's not the final arbiter. And so giving students that ability to navigate the past, not for, only some present use, but really to understand people from a time and place not like our own, is one of these ways that we can empower them as citizens today in neighborhoods where people are not from a background of their own or a perspective of their own. And if our first job is to understand and not draw conclusions, when we end up drawing conclusions, they're evidence-based, they're not rooted in our own perspective, but in a diversity of perspectives. And it really just, kind of simply, it makes us better people. And there's just such rich opportunities to cultivate those skills in students in social studies classrooms because the content is so filled with a diversity of the past. And yet, if we only focus on the content of the past, we miss out on enriching our students in that way. And that's really where we want to focus, is make sure that students don't see things as this binary or stories of dead people as we often hear, but they really see value in the analysis and the understanding, which breeds this empathy that is really empowering and impactful, I think, to us as citizens.
So well said, especially understanding the past and understanding where we've come, and the changes today are evident, but still understanding that trail and what happened. And we don't apply necessarily those things today, but we understand where it came from. And I love the words significance and empathy with history. So knowing that and sharing what you just shared, Zach, how do we do that in the classrooms today? What needs to be done? What's different?
Sure. So I think that goes back to the title of our talk, is the breaking down of silos. And so if we go back to kind of the original aim that I said about shifting the paradigm from a content to a